This week in government secrets.
All right. So for this week in government secrets, which for those of you regular listeners, is a newish segment where we just spend a couple of minutes on something that happened this week in history. I'm slightly shifting the rules this week. Since it's Martin Luther King Day today, I'm doing Martin Luther King history, which didn't happen. He wasn't assassinated today in history. However, it is Martin Luther King Day. So quick rundown, quick reminder of the assassination of Martin Luther King. And I went back and listened to a little bit of the episode where we actually covered this more in depth. It is episode 6, way back when we were young whippersnappers.
Young children not knowing about Baltimore Camp's forward pass invention. It was the early days.
Baltimore. And at the time of episode 6, Graham did not know. I was proud to teach something Graham didn't know, that the only trial ever to be held on the assassination of Martin Luther King was in 1999. And it found that James Earl Ray was not the killer of Martin Luther King.
That's right.
It found that Lloyd Jowers, along with government agencies, multiple government agencies, assassinated Martin Luther King. And it was covered in the mainstream media. It just was barely covered. There's like a tiny little article in the back of the New York Times. And the entire King family was party to this lawsuit and agreed with the findings. So you'd think someone that might care about who killed their beloved father and husband and everything would be the King family. And the King family does not believe that James Earl Ray killed him. Lloyd Jowers was the owner of a bar and grill that was right across from where Martin Luther King was shot. And he's the one who broke down the gun and disposed of the gun. But the actual shooter was a Memphis police officer named Frank Strouser. And this is a clue. This comes from like 30, 40 years of research by William Pepper, who wrote The Plot to Kill King, I believe it's called. And you can look up, make sure you get the most current edition of the book. But so it's a Memphis police officer, but he was basically hired. I mean, I don't know if he was paid or just asked. I mean, he was an immense racist who was very happy that he shot King, but he was asked to kill him on behalf of the Dixie Mafia, which was connected to Hoover. So it's likely that Hoover basically said to his mafia buddies, hey, get someone to shoot King. And there were also other sniper groups in the area. So it seemed like if this guy didn't get the job done, then they were planning on other people doing it as backup. It's like no matter what, King was not leaving Memphis that day. And he's taken to the hospital, apparently not yet dead. And then according to the research by William Pepper, he's then basically killed in the hospital. But he was on death's door anyway. And anyway, yeah. So for those who don't know, look it up. The only trial ever held, 1999 civil trial, found that James Earl Ray did not kill Martin Luther King. He was a patsy. And the killers were this man, Lloyd Jowers, who was present at the trial. He was 90-some years old. He had nothing to gain by confessing, but he did. And he's no longer around. But in 1999, he was there, and he confessed that he had helped, dispose of the rifle. There were witnesses that saw him dispose of the rifle. Yeah. So there you go.
And the media, this should have been like the fact that I had to learn about this, last year, shows you how much this is how Martin Luther King Day is always used really by sort of whitewashing neoliberals, to say, oh, he was for freedom and equality and all that stuff that he was, but this is never talked about. Yep. And you have to go to like lefty social media people to point out the fact that Dr. King was also virulently anti-war. He was pro-labor. He was a socialist. All his speeches of all this socialism and we're spending too much money. The wealthy have too much money. We spend too much money on war. Those speeches are those are never talked about in the mainstream media. It's always the I Have a Dream speech, which is a wonderful speech. But all these other speeches where he talked about this, let alone the fact that his murderers were connected to the FBI.
Yeah.
Those two little minor things just always happen to get the whoops, we forgot. We'll get to it next year, I'm sure.
And in the final couple of years of his life, the reason they kind of let him live, honestly, I mean, the reason he wasn't killed before then, although someone did stab him, I think, was that at first it was just about getting black people civil rights, getting black people equal rights. But then as it went on, he, guess what, started tying in poor white people and poor black people, and tying in a lot of people that were not just the black people in America, which all of a sudden was much more threatening to the government as a whole. And he also came out against capitalism. He has some great quotes against capitalism. He came out against the Vietnam War, which at first he was not keen to do because he really didn't want to be maligned for it. And he wanted to basically deal with poverty in America. But eventually he just couldn't put it off any longer. And he came out against the Vietnam War. And all those things kind of came to a head where they were like, oh, this guy's getting far more threatening than just getting civil rights for black Americans.
That's that classic thing, when you just are for this one group, they'll let you, to a certain extent. But when you start unifying, what Fred Hampton did the same thing from the Black Panther standpoint. And Fred Hampton said capitalism causes racism. And he really started to realize that. And, when at the end of Malcolm X's life, we've talked about when he started to kind of talk with Dr. King more rather than
unite, be willing to work with white folks. Yeah. Uniting people more than just saying, this is a black movement.
Yeah. And that's when they killed Malcolm X, which we've covered on this show.
That is the famous photo of the other people with MLK pointing to where the shooter was. Now, what you can't see is that the reason they're pointing up is there's an embankment there that goes up. And there were all these, you see a larger shot of the area, there's all these bushes, which we covered this in episode 6. Everybody should go back and check that out. But there's all these bushes, hedges there that the shooter was hiding behind. And the following day, the Memphis, city government or whatever, municipal government, cuts down all of the hedges and basically destroys the entirety of the crime scene. They claim, it was just scheduled to be cut down that day. But of course, it's because that once all those were cut down, now no one could say, oh, the shooter was hiding behind the hedges because there's no hedges there. So the lie, which was that the shooter was James Earl Ray in James Earl Ray's room, he was staying in, hotel room. He was inside the bathroom shooting through the window. All of a sudden that becomes the only possibility because, any shooter that was out on that lawn would have been seen, except that there were hedges there the day before. We're just cleaning up the crime scene. Sometimes, we really got to get these hedges out of the way of this crime scene.
I mean, listen. Whenever there's a crime scene, you definitely want to just kind of wipe it clean.
Yeah.
Get rid of everything.
Sometimes there are blood stains muddying up the crime scene. There's blood stains. There's footprints that just really, really awful for a crime scene to get all those footprints around it. So what you need to do, if you ever see a dead body, is just dump some bleach on it, scrub it down.
Yes. Hose it, get a big hose out. Yeah. You get rid of any gunpowder residue that could be on a leaf or anything like, get rid of all of it. You want to get
it ready for the authorities. That's how you do that. And if there's a body, you chop it up and you throw it in the river. And that's how you get ready for the criminologist to really check things out.
I'm going to do some how-to videos, how to get your crime scene ready. Like I'm going to just do some basic cleanup tips of a crime scene
for a thorough investigation.
Yes. So you get all the evidence collected correctly. That's great. That's fantastic. Government secrets segment number 1. Well, I think in honor of MLK Day, it's fitting to point out another way Bill Clinton as president completely helped. He was always thought to be this big hero of Black people, African Americans and other people around the world.
And I'm going to say 35th best president without a doubt.
And so he's always referred to what happened as Rwanda, and he kind of was like, would sort of slightly beat himself up, like, I should have done more. It was happening. It was always told sort of, it was happening so quickly that we didn't have time to respond. And the Rwandan genocide was awful. But there's an article in, what is it? Current Affairs, that came out in 2016, Bill Clinton's shameful genocide denial. So
I love the idea of it happened too quickly, because, you know, the U.S. government, we always sit back and see how things turn out first. You know, we're never the first on the ground. The moment there's an election going down that we might want to be involved in, we sit back, we see how things go.
We don't participate in, I don't know, 30 some coups or whatever that we've covered on this show. Like, no.
I saw a list of 28 U.S. backed coups in Latin America, I think in the past 20 years. Yeah, the past 20 years, I think.
Yeah, 28, just in Latin America.
Yeah, just in Latin America. Maybe past 30 years, just in Latin America. Yeah.
Since the CIA's inception, there's been something like 40 or something worldwide. Like, it's
and that's coups. That's not influence, which is a whole other thing.
That number is infinite. Like, that's, so I'm going to read a little bit from this article. The events in Rwanda during 1994 would be a true test of the country's commitment to the principle that, you know, we would never again, right? We always said after World War II, never again, right? We saw Germany stockpiling, and then we found out towards the end of the war what was happening in the death camps, and we always said never
again. The U.S. had no idea that things were bad. They thought, you know, I'm sure wherever he's sending the Jews, he's probably treating them great.
Right.
Yeah.
When you put people on rail cars, you know, and transport them like cattle, it's going to be a good outcome. I mean, you just already know it's something good's coming.
And for those who think that, well, the U.S. did eventually get in there and save all those people. Well, you know what we didn't do is bomb the rail lines headed to the concentration camps. Not on the list.
Yep. Never happened. So what they say, it was the Rwandan genocide was fundamentally an event that could have been stopped, or at least significantly mitigated, through the taking of steps that were known and feasible. But over the course of the 100 days, as literally hundreds of thousands of bodies piled up in Rwanda, President Clinton did exactly what he had promised he would never do. He remained silent and paralyzed in the face of genocide. And even as his fragmentary awareness grew into indisputable facts, he lackadaisically permitted it to happen again. They're quoting his speech where he was like, we'll never let this happen again, right? About World War II, right? But what is seldom acknowledged is Clinton actually did something worse. And this is sort of on par with the Democrats in general, United States in general, the Republic, but really the Clintons. This is right, like page 1 of the Clinton handbook of deception and bullshit is the like, oh, golly, we didn't know. Hillary's famously said that about Harvey Weinstein. Boy, we didn't know. We didn't know when I was Secretary of State.
When I was calling Ronan Farrow trying to get him to crush the Harvey Weinstein story, how could I have known?
How could I have known? When Ghislaine Maxwell came to our daughter's wedding, when I was a sitting Secretary of State, where we have a background check for a former president and a sitting Secretary of State.
And Epstein was already a sex offender.
Yes. How could we have known that this woman who had settled out of court 2 years prior for being a pedophile and a sex trafficker, how could we have known that thing that everyone already knew when she was at our daughter's wedding? Like,
what am I, a psychic? Did I swallow a monkey's paw? I don't know.
How am I supposed to know that when I have the United States Secret Service doing background checks? How could I possibly know? So typical of why the Clintons are awful pieces of shit. So he did not just sit on his hands. He deliberately stalled the efforts of others to intervene and went so far as to deny the genocide in order to avoid being pressured to stop it. So again, this is the sophistication of the Clinton maneuverings, political maneuverings, is they like deny it. So then you can say, oh, I was wrong at first. I mean, this is it's like the what is it? The 94 crime bill. Bill Clinton has even apologized, said, well, we thought it was going to do good stuff at the time.
Yeah. he and Biden were like, it might have been a bit harsh.
Ooh.
I had no idea that white people do more coke and black people do more crack. I didn't know. We just thought crack probably good for a life sentence, coke good for 10 days in jail.
I didn't know when I was getting donors who were all cokehead Wall Street people, that I didn't know that when I wrote this bill. I love when the Clintons play like, golly gee, we didn't know. The most savvy, sophisticated, you went to Harvard, you're highly educated. I love how they turn that on and off. Like, especially Hillary, like, oh, women aren't allowed to be president. We're capable, we're smart, we're sharp, we're strong, but we didn't know, goops, yoink, like I'm a girl.
My favorite was when she had to turn over her hard drives because the FBI was investigating, and she wiped the hard drives, and then they were asking her if she wiped the hard drives, and she goes, what do you mean, like with a cloth? Yeah. Yep. You're Harvard educated, lawyer, don't know what wiping a hard drive is.
Oh. You mean one of those like hand wipes? I mean, are those good for computers?
What's a hard drive? Are you talking about like Route 6? What is a hard drive? Is that when Bill is driving and he's aroused and he keeps trying to get me to put his hand there? What is a hard drive?
When big Clinton supporters, when those Clinton bots, those Hill bots on Twitter were like, when you're like, well, wait a minute. She was first lady when Bill Clinton did all these awful things. Like, well, they were a married couple. You can't blame that. So now they're just a regular married couple. Oh, right. So when Nancy Reagan had her just say no, that wasn't a part of Ronald Reagan's war on drugs, because the first lady, while not an elected official, definitely has political influence. So now Hillary, we're supposed to believe, was just some little golly gee housewife in the West Wing, just, I don't know, figuring out what flower arrangements.
Golly gee housewife who had been on the board of Walmart.
Yes, the board of Walmart, who was an attorney that went after women that accused her husband of rape and crucified these victims. That woman, the woman that laughed when she got a pedophile off, that woman, that's the gee, I didn't know what was going on. The woman who flew on Epstein's plane twice. And Bill was on 26 times. I don't know. I guess Bill just likes planes. When they were hanging out at Epstein's compound numerous times in New Mexico, I don't know. He's just a fun billionaire. Okay. God damn it. The Clintons are such bags of shit. And
people have a great point that it took the Democrats to do a lot of the most damaging things to America over the past, whatever number of years, because it was like Bill Clinton got into office and he was able to get rid of Glass-Steagall and force through NAFTA and force this crime bill through. That's the most racist thing in the world, that created the largest prison state on the planet. Like, that's all a Democratic president, because when a Republican tries to do that, people raise a fuss. When a Democrat does it, people are like, yeah. And the gutting of the telecommunications bill, like all that shit.
Look at so people were losing their shit when Trump was putting kids in cages, and well, that was awful. Nobody seemed to remember those cages were built by Obama. Oh, and guess what? You know who's putting kids in cages now? President Biden these kids are in cages today.
No, Graham, no, those are overflow facilities. Okay,
like a summer camp.
As AOC said in like an Instagram video, she's like, let's be clear. Trump was separating families. That's not being done now. Really?
Oh,
really?
Really?
Are you sure?
That's right. And that's why, and Joe Biden, who has signed more drilling permits in his first year in office than Trump did.
I'm hoping those are for lobotomies. I'm hoping it's that kind of drilling.
Yeah, I wish it was like drilling for like senior care for presidents with dementia. I wish it was that. But anyway,
and Obama proudly, when he was talking to oil audiences, oil groups proudly said he laid more oil pipeline than any president ever had, enough to circle the earth 3 times. So, as climate change destroys our planet and destroys our futures, just remember Obama.
Right. And then the dumb neoliberals will go, what, but the Republicans? Yeah, it's a foregone. We all know the Republicans are awful. They're awful pieces of shit. This is what happens in a duopoly when you have two parties that are both puppets of the ruling class. Anyway, let's get back to Clinton helping a genocide happen.
Not to get off on a rant here.
So the most important thing to understand in analyzing international responsibility for the genocide is whether enough information was available to the decision makers. A person cannot be held accountable for not stopping something he did not know was occurring. Indeed, Bill Clinton, according to Samantha Power, is said to have convinced himself that if he had known more, he would have done more. He claimed in 98 that he did not fully appreciate the depth and the speed with which Rwandans were being engulfed in this unimaginable terror. Okay, that sounds reasonable. You didn't know. Golly gee, we didn't know. Clinton offers his present-day charitable works in Rwanda as proof that he once made aware. Oh, fuck, the Clinton Foundation. Jesus Christ.
He's a philanthropist, Graham. He's a philanthropist.
Is this the same Clinton Foundation that is like snatching up kids in Cuba, or is this a different one than the one that the 20 countries that donated to the Clinton Foundation in 2008 all got defense contracts from the State Department under Hillary Clinton in 2009? I'm just trying to get clear on which foundation we're talking about.
Often confused. That's the Clinton Foundation. It's a slightly different thing. They really fucked up on the naming rights.
So dumb. I went to public school.
But to get at the deeper reasoning behind why the U.S. would allow such a horrific thing to happen is because the U.S. equation of whether we get involved, fully involved in a country, or whether we try and create a coup there, is 100% greed, power, money. There is never an analysis that is, could we actually help some people that would not benefit us at all?
Right.
So if you look at every country that we've full on invaded, bombed, all that shit, almost without exception. First of all, they're not white. Almost, we're talking since World War II. And even with World War II, we were very skeptical before we went after the Germans. But since World War II, exclusively not white. And almost without exception, outside of our central banking arm. And almost without exception, either not using the petrodollar as the reserve currency or threatening to not use it. Mm-hmm. So it's like people for a while thought it just had to do with oil, that Iraq had oil, but it's really not about that in the larger picture. Yes, we love stealing oil, but it's really not about that. The larger picture is centralized, central currency, central banking, whether we, and for those who are inside our central banking, we can destroy them economically. So we don't usually have to bomb them.
Yeah, this, as it says in an article, Clinton's claim to not have fully understood the situation is a lie. Clinton knew there was genocide, knew its scale. People of all levels of government knew. It was all over the press. In fact, the idea that any informed official at the time could plead ignorance to the Rwandan genocide is laughable. As time passes, it may be easier and easier to blur the histories to suggest that everything was opaque and uncertain, and that we could have taken it would have taken an impossible omniscience in order to understand. But the violence in Rwanda was in the newspapers. It was just the stuff of minor internal State Department memoranda and overlooked faxes at the bottom of receptionist inboxes. It was in the New York Times and the Washington Post. So I guess President Clinton couldn't read the Post and the Times, nor could he have a staff member read those. The administration's spokespeople were being regularly asked about it. So it was in the mainstream news, and everyone was asking, at press briefings and stuff, what's going on? What is the Clinton White House doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Right. What are you doing? Oh, we're busy locking up black men, is what they say.
Yeah. His real answer would be, well, between the time I spend sticking cigars in interns and the time I spend flying on pedophile jets, I just don't have the time. But also, there's no benefit to us stopping a genocide. I don't care if those people die. We're killing people. With our sanctions, we're killing hundreds of thousands in Iraq. Madeleine Albright said killing 500,000 children in Iraq under the Clinton administration was worth it. So
Yes.
what do we care if people die in a genocide unless there's an upside outside of saving lives? We don't care about saving lives.
No, we don't care. Because anyway, around 94 is the time when Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were invited to Clinton's White House. So how can we deal with the genocide of a bunch of voters? I mean, people who aren't registered voters. Rwandans don't vote in America. Who gives a shit? It's easy enough, if we know nothing about it, to accept the proposition that the scale of the Rwanda genocide became clear only after the fact. Fog of war and all that. It certainly comports with the received image of Africa as a dark and unfathomable continent out of which reliable information never flows. But any glance through contemporary sources instantly invalidates this view of history. To say one didn't know is just not implausible or unlikely. It's a lie. I mean, saying Bill Clinton lies, that's a stretch.
Whoa, buddy. I will not sit here while you malign our greatest president, 37th greatest president. I will not sit here. That is the line too far, my friend.
Oh, it's so hard. Again, remember that President Clinton tearfully apologized to Rwandans and said he did not fully appreciate the depth and the speed, right? On April 6, 1994.
That's what Monica Lewinsky said.
That's
I didn't fully appreciate the depth and the speed at which I would be fucking predated by this guy.
Yeah. April 6, 1994.
Preyed upon, I guess I should say.
Yeah. So April 6th, 1994, the day before the Rwandan genocide began, the country's president had been assassinated. His plane shot down over Kigali by parties unknown. It was a small spark necessary to trigger a genocide. The president was Hutu, and the killing provided the necessary pretext for the country's military forces to carry out a plan they had been working on for some time: the extermination of their ethnic rivals, the Tutsi minority. On April 7th, a motley assemblage of paramilitary forces under the direction of high-ranking members of the political elite began a concerted program of mass slaughter. Inspired by the apocalypse Hutu power ideology, fueled by hate radio stations commanding ordinary citizens to kill, groups of machete-wielding death squads roamed through the country, killing every Tutsi they could find, as well as moderate Hutus. In this nationwide paroxysm of stabbing, raping, and shooting, hundreds of thousands will be killed over the next 100 days.
And Graham, I got a bonus government secrets that we covered not too long ago. How do you think you end up with these two phenomenally different, phenomenally kind of at odds groups, ethnic groups, Hutus and Tutsis, in the same country? How did that happen? Oh,
I doubt it has anything. There's no way America helped organize.
Maybe it was the Berlin Conference, which America was at in 1855, in which the European countries got together, all white men, and put up a map of Africa and decided where the countries were. And they mashed together various tribes that hated each other, and they split apart various tribes and cultures and peoples that loved each other and were united. And they said, here are the nations of Africa. And to this day, Africa is still trying to deal with the fact that these nations were thrust upon them. These ridiculous lines were thrust upon them by white rich men. Bonus government secret.
Bonus government secret. White colonizers ruin an entire continent. So that timeline of April 6th, the assassination began. April 7th is when basically all of this built up hate speech on the radios. And as you said, going back to 1855, the Berlin Conference. So you're talking about over 100 years of bad blood, right?
Right.
So, the killings began on this. So he was assassinated on the 6th of April. The killings began on the 7th and lasted 3 months. On the Thursday, members of the Presidential Guard killed 11 Belgian U.S. peacekeepers. Pretty sure America might be made aware of that. as well as the Rwandan prime minister. On Friday the 8th, Bill Clinton publicly stated that the prime minister had been sought out and murdered. Reuters described a wave of bloodletting in which members of the security forces and gangs of youths wielding machetes, knives, and clubs rampaged through the capital, Kigali, setting tribal scores by hacking and clubbing people to death or shooting them. On Saturday, April 9th, 3 days since the assassination, Clinton included references to Rwanda in his weekly radio address, which was otherwise devoted to crime and other domestic issues. Again, trying to put black men behind bars. And focused largely on Clinton's pitch for his crime bill. Haha. Of these situations, now here we are, in his weekly addresses, Bill Clinton said this. This is when it was actually happening. So years later, oh, it was fog of war. Golly gee, I was messed up. Being president's hard. It's so busy. He said this. Finally, let me say just a brief word about a very tragic situation in the African nation of Rwanda. I'm deeply concerned about the continuing violence. So any of his Bill Clinton lies 4 times before the guy wakes up in the morning. So when he says, I didn't know, he's flat out lying. He's contradicting his own words. Just like when a guy says, I was on Epstein's plane 4 times and flight logs show 26 times. Like, he's just a fucking liar and a rapist and a piece of shit.
Yep.
So he said this. I'm deeply concerned about the continuing violence. There are about 250 Americans there. Oh, another reason the president might be
that's
aware
all. That's all that matters is the 250 Americans.
Which, I'm very concerned about their safety, and I want you to know that we're doing all we can to ensure their safety. That same day, United Nations observers in Kigali witnessed a massacre that took place in a Polish church in which 100 people, including children, were brutally hacked to death. The New York Times described Rwanda and Burundi as 2 nations joined by a common history of genocide, raising the specter of the G word. On the 11th, now 4 days, we're 4 days into the genocide. Clinton has already said it's awful. I'm aware of it. The New York Times published the accounts of the Americans who had recently evacuated. It was the most basic terror, said Chris Grunman, 37, an American evacuee, describing the fears of the Rwandan civilians and officials who were targets of the violence. He and his family bunkered down in their house with mattresses against the windows, heard the ordeals of Rwandan victims over a 2-way radio. The UN radio was filled with national staff screaming for help. He said, they were begging, come save me. My house is being blown up, or they're killing me. There was nothing we could do. At one point, we just had to turn it off. And it goes on and on. I mean, this.
So didn't know what was happening.
Didn't know. Couldn't read the New York Times.
Yep.
So on the 12th, 5 days, we're not even in a full week yet. The New York Times printed a profile of several Adventist missionaries who had fled. Now that we are out, Mr. Van Loren said, I fear in a way that we have betrayed the people we came to help. Now they fear that most of these people, deprived of their protection, will become victims of the bloodletting that set the majority Hutu tribe of Rwanda against the minority Tutsis. Red Cross officials estimate that the violence has taken more than 10,000 lives. This is on day 5. 10,000 people. The Red Cross, an international organization that is absolutely going to report its findings to the United States State Department and United Nations, already had an estimate 10,000 people dead. But Bill Clinton wasn't sure yet. Lives in Cagulione and many other more in the countryside. I mean, I can't keep reading this article because
I imagine there were meetings where he was like, "Do they have oil? No. Do they have?
right.
Is there
Exactly.
a lot of gold there? No, not that we
No.
know of." Well, then I don't understand. Why am I talking about this? I don't.
Yeah. Is there anything we need? Well, the cell phone boom hadn't started yet, so they didn't. If there's minerals, there's nothing to care about. So
Right. Right.
there's no oil. Do we need
It's
them
like, do they
strategically?
have Burger Kings? Give me something, some reason I should defend it.
There's 250 Americans there, but they weren't working for a big corporation because of
Right.
Shell Oil was like, hey man, they're attacking our refinery. Then the fucking Marines would have been called in and some shit would have gone down. There was nothing like that. There wasn't oh, they overtook Citibank. So then the US Army was called in.
The Citibank Rwandan branch was like, this is fucking crazy.
Yeah. Whatever. Amazon had a warehouse there and the Bill's stock went down or whatever. So it's I just showed you in the first 5 days, there's no way the president of the United States was not aware of what the hell was happening and could have, if he started, all right, we're sending guys in on the 7th or 8th day and wow, we could have prevented 10, 20,000 deaths. But we finally got after day 7, but just we didn't know. Yeah, you did. You absolutely knew. You were giving radio addresses talking about it in the first 5 days. It's preposterous. So once again, Bill Clinton is a liar and basically did nothing. And then, what an excuse to get the Clinton Foundation in there to snatch up Rwandan kids. So that's our first, remember how awful the Clintons are on MLK Day.
In case you thought that they just didn't know what was going down. Not so much.
What's now Lee Camp's second government secret segment after Graham loses hope for humanity yet again.
Well, we can't say we burst your bubble on how much you loved Bill Clinton. So
no, it wasn't I thought this guy was great. It was oh, here's another example on top of the 10-minute rant you and I went on of all the awful shit that he's done. This is just oh, add this to the list of why the Clintons are the worst.
Yeah. So this, our episodes are not really intended to be topical, but this one has a little topical lead-in, which is the horrific fire in the Bronx that just took place last week, killed 17 people, the most deadly fire in New York City, I think, in 30 years. And I'm actually going to get into more details about that on Redacted Tonight this week. But there is a history of fires in the Bronx that most people don't know. The one that just happened is a little different, but we're going back in history for a bit here. America was plagued with segregation during the 1950s. The South Bronx, however, was amongst the most culturally integrated neighborhoods in the country. The diverse backgrounds were especially known for producing a variety of great music. So Bronx, as we've seen in other episodes, like with Tulsa, was a thriving in many ways. I mean, they were still poor, but culturally speaking, thriving area of the country for Black and Latino folks. And what happens, Graham, when an area of the country is thriving culturally for, not white people?
Oh, we got to set that shit on fire. There's no way. It's oh boy, you are asking for trouble. That's right up there with nationalize the oil. That's going to get you some those kind of democratically elected socialist. Those are bad words. So
it's very similar. Yeah. Saying we have a thriving Black community in the 50s, 60s. It's kind of like Gaddafi walking out and saying, I'd like to get rid of the US dollar and create an African currency of our own.
Ooh. Well, no. As the Berlin Conference proved, this is white guys are going to control a African continent.
Yes. So during the 1970s, this is a history that many people have forgotten, probably intentionally. Houses of the South Bronx were set ablaze. 80% of housing was lost in fires. 250,000 people were displaced. And the narrative pushed by the media at the time, and still prevails today in many regards, was that the destruction was the fault of the residents. You know, the children were just into arson. They just loved it. They were just fans of setting shit on fire. They loved burning down their own houses. All of them loved it.
Here, kids, here's some oily rags and sparklers. Go have fun.
Yeah. And Graham, you know how black folks are. They just love burning down their own houses.
Right. Yeah. They don't respect their own stuff. So white people need to come in and help them. Right. Got it.
So to get into what led up to the fires, let's also say there were other things going on. What made the, and by the way, this article is from bronxriver.org. You can find it there. What made the South Bronx a music center had also made it a target for discriminatory policies. Redlining, for one, is a practice that had started as early as the 1930s. Any neighborhood that had a 5 to 10% or more Black or Puerto Rican population was seen as detrimental, right? You're hurting property values by having so many Blacks and Latinos around. So a red line on a map would be drawn around these places, indicating that they should not be eligible for loans, home insurance, or fire insurance. Given how the South Bronx... Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's...
that was just heavy breathing. I thought you...
It's just like, it's stuff like this when people are like, there's no systemic racism. There's these little things you don't realize as a white, and when white people say, well, I'm poor, I've had it tough. White privilege doesn't mean just that you get wealth.
It doesn't mean you're just rich. Yeah.
No, it doesn't mean that you're rich. It means the system isn't stacked. Now, the system is stacked against working class people of all ethnicities for sure, but it's way more stacked against people of color. There's just no two ways about it. Like, again, people don't realize access to credit, to loans, not credit cards, but small business loans, home loans, being able to own your own home, you don't understand what privilege that makes. Because if you own your own home and you build up some equity in that home, you can take a line of credit against that to improve. You can build an addition. You can remodel your garage. You can, take the room above your garage and turn it into a 1-bedroom apartment that is now an income. So now your garage is generating revenue. So the equity in your home can be used to generate revenue. You could take a line of credit to go open up a small business. All of this stuff has helped the middle class expand. All of these
if you come from the middle class, like I do, guess what? My parents paid for my college. I didn't graduate from college with loads of debt, meaning I'm starting into like adult life with a fucking leg up.
Yes, right there. And again, I mean, that's a whole nother discussion, but my parents paid for my college too. It was $8,000 a year, to go to school.
Mine was $5,000 a year. Yeah.
$5,000 a year. You're talking about now it's like $20,000 a semester. I mean, it's like, it's insane. So there's all of these things in place. And why were my parents and your parents able to pay for their kids to go to, state colleges for $5,000 to $8,000 a year? Because they were born in neighborhoods that had decent public schools, and they were able to get a college degree for next to nothing. And they were not held back or not admitted to schools or whatever. None of those things were in place for them.
And what systemic racism means for those who are poor whites, I think it's important for them to understand. It doesn't mean that your life, like you said, it doesn't mean your life has just been easy. It means your life is not hard because of your race.
Right.
Your life might be hard for other reasons. It might be fucking awful, but it doesn't mean it's hard because of your race, which is what Black people are going up against all the time. It's like, yes, there are Black people that have very much succeeded in our society, but it's like succeeding while you're waist deep in mud and everybody else is running on dry land.
Right. Yeah. And you still have to deal with that racist thing. You're more worried if the cops pull you over. If you're a successful white person, even if you were born in white poverty and you worked yourself out of it and you've got wealth, you're not worried about the police.
My dad gives a great example, and I didn't find out about this. He told me about this a few years ago, so I didn't know this about my father. That he grew up in Florida, very racist Florida at the time, in 1950s, and he was basically a delinquent child. He would fucking go around doing what the fuck, and they'd get caught sometimes, but he was basically given chance after chance after
Oh,
chance.
yes.
But one of the biggest ones was they saw that in the junkyard there were car parts, and he was like, "Oh, we'll go in there. We'll get some of the car parts we need for our car." You know, he's 16 or something, and so they break in, climb the fence, break into the junkyard. They're immediately caught by the security guard, taken, arrested by cops, put in front of a judge, and the judge says, "Well, you seem like good young men. Just don't do it again." And, at the time, he probably thought nothing of it. He was probably just like, thank goodness. As he got older, he goes, oh my God, if I'd been a black kid, I would have spent fucking 10 years in jail. It would have changed my entire life.
Yes. That was Lee, in the 80s in Chicago. I was arrested twice in high school, twice, for doing stupid, vandal, delinquent shit. And both times we were released that day. It was me and a bunch of my white guy buddies. And even though my high school was 40% black, we were all hanging, me and most of my friends were white, and we went out and we got busted. And the cops gave us a slap on the wrist. One time they just released us. Another time I had to call my parents, and my parents were divorced, and I just was like, they said they let me call my parents. Well, you got to call your parents and put your mom on the phone. And so I dialed the phone, and the cop wasn't looking, and I hung up. And then I pretended like it was still ringing. I was like, she's out of town, man. My parents are divorced. So, and I was like, oh, she's not home. And he's like, all right, you can go with this guy's dad. And another time the guy just called my house, and it was 1 in the morning. And I was like, ask for my stepdad, Sim, which is my brother. I was hoping my brother would pick up the phone. I was like, God, if my brother picks up the phone, he'll cover for me. And he did. And my mom picked up, and she's like, is there a Sim there? There's no Sim. Who's calling? What is it? Well, this is the Wilmette Police or Northwestern Police Department or whatever it was. And she was like, wow. So I got in trouble from my mom, but nothing. Not
stuff that would impact your life going forward.
No,
yeah.
My mom was mad at me, but I didn't go to jail, and I was on the football team, so it was like, yeah, you don't want to,
yeah, and one time I was with some buddies where, we were like a mile from my house or something, and we pulled off because we were probably 16, 17, and we went there to drink. So we have our cars pulled over, drinking beers, and a cop pulls up and fucking shines his light on us, and he's like, you guys better get out of here. And that was the end of it. And we fucking left. But if we'd been black, fucking like drinking, and like, of course we'd been arrested.
Locked up and like, hey, challenge. And then some kid might have, out of fear or whatever, like given the cop attitude, which then they go, oh, see, everything was fine until you gave us attitude. It's like,
no.
And you also know, as a white kid, if you're just like, yes sir, no sir, you're going to get off. You have a better chance at getting off, where you're just immediately scared if you're a black person and a cop shows up.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I've seen this with activists. It's, when you're at a protest or whatever, it's like cops don't need a reason to arrest you. They'll invent a reason if they want to.
Right.
Like, yeah. So, but anyway, so let's see here. Redline would mean blah, blah, blah. Given how the South Bronx housing stock was already old, redlining only worsened the conditions. People couldn't get loans. They couldn't get ahead, that kind of thing. They lived in, it encouraged disinvestment. The redlining encouraged disinvestment in the area, depriving residents of the capital needed to adequately maintain their homes. So the homes go into disrepair. Urban renewal was another tactic that harmed the South Bronx. It was described as tearing down of the quote unquote slums to replace it with middle-class housing and civic centers. In the words of James Baldwin, though, the famous black writer, it was actually, quote, Negro removal. Over 100,000 homes were demolished, and a portion of the former tenants were displaced in the South Bronx. Landlords sold their buildings to speculators and divided the apartments to create more homes, increasing density and limiting space. The circumstance people lived under were beginning to reap their effects. A lot of people ended up in difficult situations, ranging from drugs to death to crime. Eventually, all of these resulted in the decade of fires in the South Bronx. 1968 was when the fires began to were on the rise, yet the fire department's response was totally inadequate. Sometimes they would come after the buildings. They would come after the buildings had already been destroyed. Other times they may not even show up at all. And because New York City was bankrupt at the time, 12 fire companies were closed. Where do you think they closed them? in the South Bronx.
No, they didn't close them in the nice white neighborhoods. The Upper West Side didn't lose a fire to house.
Exactly. But you can imagine in this incredibly racist time, they see that, they hear that a building's on fire. They're like, isn't that the Bronx? We're not going there.
Right.
The devastation of the fires, and then, of course, you have the media problem. The devastation of the fires were underrepresented. By the 1970s, every building had seen a fire at least once. At least half the fires were not even recorded just because of how many there were. And also because you've got white firefighters being like, why are we going to put down that we didn't put out a fire? Let's just not record it. And then we decrease the number of fires we didn't get to in time. More fire marshals were demanded by the people, yet the Office of Management and Budget said that fire marshals would not solve the problem of arson. The media made it sound like residential kids were just interested in arson and how nefarious that they could be. But in fact, it was landlords often paying for their own buildings to be burned. There were virtually no consequences since landlords did not have to fix the buildings. They could simply take the money from the insurance and walk away. So basically, the buildings are collapsing, things are getting bad, and these slumlords just think, I'll make more money by just burning this thing down and getting out of here. But, of course, they're not going to announce to the residents, hey, we're going to burn the building down. So they just do it. People get hurt, people die, oh well. In 1980, Lloyd's of London, the insurance group, paid out $45 million to those landlords, which is $250 million in 2018. The only reason this was even known was because of a federal investigation, but many of these fires never had such federal investigation. So there's a lot that's not even known because fire departments wouldn't show up in time. They just write down cause unknown in their books. End of story. Hope briefly came when President Jimmy Carter had come to the Bronx, seeing the precariousness people were living under, and he wanted to renovate the South Bronx, and he pledged $55 million to save it, which I guess would have been over $250 million today. Graham, I'll give you another pop quiz. Did that money ever arrive to the South Bronx?
Wow. I'm going to say probably it was put on a Pony Express, and then that Pony Express got shanghaied. Probably by one of the residents that was setting all the fires, right?
And weirdly, the Pony Express got diverted to a gated community where the money just disappeared. We don't know why.
It disappeared. And then 18 months later, they had a new swimming pool and a gym. That's weird. And all the residents had new cars.
Very odd, very odd. But yeah, money never arrived. And even worse, a man named Ronald Reagan came into office. See, I realize Carter was probably one of the better presidents if you had to name one, but this is the difference between Democrats and Republicans. Democrats promised to fix the South Bronx and just the money never arrived.
Do it, right.
Reagan was like, fuck those people.
Yeah. Nope. Fuck them. Fuck the gays. Let's spend it all on a Cold War with Russia.
Reagan did not believe any government program could repair the South Bronx and only worked to take away money from existing ones that could potentially help. I think he was basically like, black people things are never going to go well for them. So why don't we, whatever money we're devoting to them, let's just take that away.
Yeah. And then trickle down economics, tax breaks for the rich. Let's understand who butters our bread and let them have whatever they want. And now that the evangelicals have taken over the Republican Party in the late 70s, early 80s, we'll just let those psychos, we'll get their votes by saying all their right-wing racist, homophobic nonsense. And then the
Lord works in mysterious ways, Graham. I mean, at one time he talked to a burning bush. Maybe he'll talk to a burning building in the Bronx. You never know. So we need to let these fires burn because it might be the Lord speaking his piece.
Well, the Lord said tax breaks for the rich. If you read it, it's in Leviticus, I believe. Tax breaks for the rich. It's
if you take the third letter of Leviticus and then change it to say tax breaks for the rich, that's exactly what it says.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus, remember when he said, bomb the poor for money? Remember when he said that? I remember when Jesus
I do.
said that.
Yeah.
Remember when he said, get a gun for Jesus? Kill in my name. I remember when Jesus said that. He always said that a lot. I mean, sometimes it was
A
when he was
lot of
drinking.
killing my name. Yeah.
He was always like, he would be playing
of it.
Papa Shot at a Buffalo Wild Wings, and he'd just be like, just killing my name. And he would like hit like 10 in a row. It was amazing.
Yeah. Good guy. A good guy who really wanted to murder a lot of people.
I mean, just know when you own a gun and you murder somebody, Jesus is smiling.
Yes, he is. Smiles at you. Every time you murder someone with a gun, Jesus gets his wings. So, just to reiterate, 80% of buildings in the South Bronx had seen fires and were burned. 250,000 residents lost their housing. However, here is the brief glimmer of hope, a little upbeat note to end it out on, because I don't want Graham to wrap that mic cord around his neck.
You know, before I was getting ready for the show today, I got back from yoga.
I take 3 Valium.
I was like doing push-ups and upper body stuff and was really mad just at the state of the world. And then I took a shower and shaved and was making a smoothie. And I always have to really like remind myself how much fun it is to do this show with you, because I know we're going to talk about awful stuff. Like I really have to be like, because I was literally like, oh God, I don't want to do this. And then I thought, no, I have to like talk to myself and go, dude, we're going to laugh with Lee. Like I got a kid. It's like I got like a teenage kid who's like, ugh. And I'm like, no, you're gonna laugh with Lee. Yes, we're gonna cover awful stuff, but your buddy Lee's funny. So and we're gonna have a good time.
It's like seeing a 16-year-old child of yours that you adore, but he's in juvie, so you have to talk to him through a plate glass window.
Yes, pretty much.
And so you're like, no, I'm going to be really excited to see him in such terrible circumstances.
In these horrible circumstances. It's literally like, oh, and you got to remember, be smiling because his world is awful. You got to be happy. He's making birdhouses with guys with face tattoos. So let's be happy.
So it's like you're seeing your grandpa who has Alzheimer's and thinks it's still the roaring 1920s. And so you're like, and he doesn't know he's in like a fucking the lowest level, her nursing home where shit's just awful. And you're like, remember, he thinks it's great.
Yeah, he's talking about hopefully they'll vote out Hoover. Like, you will. Let's hope.
Well, Graham, I'm glad to be your dysfunctional grandpa with Alzheimer's.
I want you to know that's how I view our friendship, Lee. You're my dysfunctional grandfather with Alzheimer's. Oh,
well, here's the
silver lining, kids.
I feel like you're the grandpa in the nursing home, and I'm bringing you the chocolate covered raisins you like real much. Real much is an expression I just created. You like a whole lot. And so I just here's something to put a smile on your face.
It's like a kid's house just got burned to the ground, and here's a candy cane.
Yes, it is. So the people of South Bronx were fed up at that point going into the 1980s. Grassroots organizations used culture, community, and music to reshape the area. Old buildings were maintained so after school programs could take place. Local community members trained people on how to reconstruct buildings. They invested their labor for no price other than providing their home the opportunity to flourish. An arson investigation team was finally assigned to the Bronx in 1982 from local pressure, and the fires had slowed down as a result. The Bronx residents were victims of fundamentally racist and classist policies that were sugar-coated as an improvement. In addition to that, the blame was placed on them for their own neighborhood being destroyed. They had lost their lives, their loved ones, their homes, and so much more. To recenter their story on anything but that is unjust. More importantly, the fight is not over. Now the Bronx is getting gentrified, and longtime residents who rebuilt the borough are being displaced. and action is needed to fight against that. But this article was written before the fire that we just saw in the Bronx a little over a week ago, where 17 residents died in a single building. And basically a slumlord that the mayor, Eric Adams, is good buddies with, one of his biggest donors, allowed that building to have no heat and to not have self-closing doors, which is one of the things that buildings have to stop fires. And he didn't repair any of that. And then Eric Adams, the new mayor, the brand new former cop mayor, gave speech after speech about how really the fault is the fire victims. They should have closed that door. If they just, especially the dead, if the dead had just closed that door, I feel like things would have been very different.
Well, it's like people that die of starvation. They should just eat more food. That's, I mean, it's their own fault for letting toxic capitalism plunder their resources so they have no money or food to buy food. They should just get more and just eat more food.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And poor people who get diabetes from eating McDonald's every day should just go to the organic food mart and buy the $5 head of broccoli instead of the $1 Big Mac. I don't know why they don't do that.
Yeah, just go to the Whole Foods that isn't anywhere in your neighborhood that you have to take 2 buses and a train to get to, and then you can't afford it when you get there. Just do that.
Yeah,
it's like these
just spend $100 on a couple of meals, not a biggie.
Yeah. Spend $100 on 2 bags of groceries that would have cost you $30, at a regular store or whatever. And then it's the same. It's like these people in the Middle East who have the audacity of building a country above American oil reserves. That blows me away. Like that, I can't even understand.
Assholes.
I know.
But if Rwanda had just built over our oil, maybe we would have cared more.
I mean, I don't know why. You got a lot of nerve building a country that's centuries older than anything America's ever created, but building a country that's like the cradle of civilization over American oil reserves. I can't even.
Unbelievable. It's also just downright dumb of Iran to put their country in between like 30 U.S. military bases. Like,
yeah, why would you do that, dude? Russia's done the same thing.
You insert yourself into our situation like that. What do you think's going to happen? You think we're going to be cool? Think we're going to play it chill? No, you're in the middle of all our military bases.
Shouldn't do it. It's your own fault.
Yep.
So, all right, that's Government Secrets full episode. Bow, bow, silver lining.
I always got to give Graham a silver lining.
Well, how's everything else going, buddy?
Going all right. Hanging in there, man. Just watching the left tear itself limb from limb, which is I was worried the left was just too united and really focused on helping people in the world. I was a little worried about that. So I'm glad to see us all fucking tearing each other apart.
Well, the good news is, Lee, the left has fixed every problem. So, I mean, like Medicare for all, we got that passed. The Green New Deal is amazing. We can see, like, the global temperatures have dropped. The water in Flint is good. There's, I mean, we're not bombing anybody. They just, Biden, it wasn't like they just gave Biden the biggest war budget ever. They cut that in half. So that's good. Homelessness is just about done.
What wasn't like the Pentagon failed their 4th audit just a couple months ago and no one talked about it. Not at all.
Everything's doing great, man. I mean, it's really solid. We've fixed racism. I mean, the Native American community is doing great. I mean, everything.
Listen, there's a Native American as the head of the Department of Interior, so I think all has been fixed.
Fixed it.
Done.
We're dropping bombs with rainbow flags on them, so now there's that diversity we can be proud of. There's no more kids in cages. I mean, it's really, we fixed every problem. So we should be just bitching about vaccine or mandates or whatever petty bullshit the left is arguing about, like a high school kids. It's really good. I'm really proud to be a part of it. I'm really glad. Like, I feel like I've really helped move to see this, and friendships are ending. It's really, it's exciting. It's something I'm so glad I spent a lot of time on.
I feel like we're getting astray from our silver lining, my man.
No, I'm just celebrating all of the left's victories. That's what I'm doing. I'm celebrating all of the left's victories.
All right.
All right, buddy. Well, Where can
Good to
people
see
watch?
you, man. All my stuff's at radindiemedia.com and leecamp.com. There's a new episode of Redacted tonight. I highly recommend, on the Pentagon audit and on much more that they failed. And yeah, so check that out, leecamp.com.
Folks, go to grahamelwood.com, sign up for our newsletter. You get a free smoothie recipe. Subscribe to rockfin.com/GrahamElwood or patreon.com/GrahamElwood. Yeah, I do my Rockfin Premium live stream tonight, 8:00 Pacific time, Graham's Late Night Crypto Lounge. We talk crypto, what's going on in the state of crypto, and then I'll do regular news stuff and I answer your questions. So it's so check all that out. So thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next week. All right, Lee.
All right, man, later.
Take care, brother. Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching. We are still in our 9th month of demonetization from YouTube. So support what we're doing at patreon.com/GrahamElwood or rockfin.com/GrahamElwood, which is a blockchain cryptocurrency platform. It's free to sign up, and there's a premium level at $10 a month. And for that, you get everybody on the platform's premium content. Myself, Lee Camp, Ron Placone, Jimmy Dore, Whitney Webb, Kim Iverson, Abby Martin, and many, many others. You can also support what we're doing at Venmo at Graham-Elwood and go to grahamelwood.com. We have a PayPal button and a PO box. I also have crypto wallets, which are all in the show notes. Thanks for supporting what we do.